Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Barbara Achilles Minardi, founder of Reach for the Stars ATX. So, okay, let's shift gears a little bit. So I want to dive into more of you as a mom. So tell us a little bit, like your kids' ages, and then I would love to, and then I'll follow up with, what have you taught them? I know you're probably trying to teach them everything that you teach in your workshop, but I know they're a little bit younger. So tell us about their ages again.
Yeah, I have a son who's 7 and a daughter who's 9. My son is in first grade, my daughter is in third. And they were really the core, the reason I started doing this. When
Mm,
I had the idea to do this, I was, talking to some of my girlfriends, and I'm like, worst case scenario, nobody understands what I'm trying to do. This doesn't really, have much traction. Worst case scenario, maybe my kids will learn a thing or two. You know what I mean?
mm,
So
mhm.
even if my focus and my dream doesn't, come to fruition, worst case scenario, my kids picked up something. And they help me a lot in the workshops when I go and do my promotions, and I go around to different events. My kids are always there with me. I think it's important not only for them to hear what I have to say, but to see how I'm putting myself out there, to see how I'm, communicating with new people, how I'm marketing myself, and trying to build a business.
Mm,
So there's so many benefits to what I'm doing for my kids. And it's funny because even in all my material that I make for the schools, because I design the curriculum for my after school workshops and enrichment programs, and on each little footnote it has for Gabby and Jax, which are the name of my kids. So they're
oh,
really the intention. They are a part of everything I do, you
mm,
know. And the way I come up with a lot of the workshops are because of situations that I've had with my children, or
yeah.
being a substitute teacher, seeing things on the playground that, wow,
Mm,
somebody should really sit down and focus on this with the kids. And
mhm,
it's funny because that's where I got the motivation, or the idea for Loose Lips Sink Ships, about how kids say sometimes too much of the wrong thing, but not enough of the stuff that they need to be telling us, right?
mm,
And
mhm,
so teaching them, okay, this is what you need to tell a grown up about. This is what you need to tell, a trusted adult about.
mhm.
And maybe this isn't so important. It's interesting, but maybe we should focus on other things. And it's big also in the elementary school too, is because kids don't know what's relevant and how to prioritize their what they want to say. And maybe something actually really bad happened that they should have told a grown up about. But then they go home and they tell their parents, but the teachers and the subs and the people that work in the elementary school never heard about it.
Yeah.
So teaching them that, yes, you do want to tell your parents, but let us know too, tell us this important stuff, because I think kids are nervous or scared, or they just don't realize that it's a priority. It's an important thing to discuss.
Mm, mhm.
But yeah, going back to my kids, they're fantastic. They are a part of everything I do here. And so yeah, worst case scenario, maybe they'll pick up a thing or two.
I have a feeling they'll pick up more than a thing or two for
I'm
sure.
hoping.
Yeah, yeah, but I love the concept of it must make your work and your personal life feel like really organically intertwined,
Yeah.
because if you're like kind of coming up with ideas about, say you're at a birthday party with one of your kids and you see something, you're like, "Oh, that might be a good idea of something to teach
Yeah.
to my class or in my class,"
Yeah.
right? It's like you're kind of like coming up
Absolutely.
with this stuff. And so that's what I like about it, because this isn't just some like this is real life. Like you don't just teach theory, you're actually kind of practicing what you preach, because these are things that have
Yeah.
really happened. Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
Well, that's kind of where I get a lot of my inspiration as well, because have got teenagers of my own, and so then I'm constantly like, oh my gosh, this is a thing I need to start talking about more of, or
Yep.
focus on. So I like that. And what do you hope that someday they say about you?
Oh goodness. I hope they say the same thing that I say about my mom. My mom's also a big inspiration for this. She's very strong. She's had overcome a lot of obstacles in her life. I don't know a lot of people that would have persevered as well as my mom has.
Mm.
And so I hope that there's some equal respect and consideration there. Um, and I've tried really hard to do good for them.
Mm.
Like I said, a lot of the stuff I do is because of them. They are the ignition to all of this.
Mhm.
Um, and I just want them to think that, I did the best I could.
Mhm.
And again, just think warmly of me. I think, the relationships between parents and children are often very complicated with lots of, layers and just, I mean, I have it as well. But regardless of all that, I hope they have positive things to say and they realize that, they were the center of all of this.
Mhm. That's beautiful.
Mm.
I love that. So, it made me think, what if you have a mom who really is needing help with her kids
Mhm.
and she thinks she's modeling or she's trying to model or she's doing her best to model, but no matter how hard she tries, it just doesn't seem to take with her kid. It doesn't seem to work. And so she finds out about you from today and they want to enroll in your workshop, but yet they have a resistant child. Like what advice or encouragement could you give to the mom in order to maybe somehow help get the child there? And then if the child is there and they're still resistant, how can you help break down those walls a little bit?
I've come across those kids quite a bit because my workshop is not really a workshop that people technically, that people are that familiar with. They don't really have expectations to tell their children. They don't really know what to tell their children. So their children are even more, confused coming in. So I understand that. When I was a child, I was extremely shy. I was like painfully shy and self-conscious. I had a speaking disorder, making things, communicating a huge challenge. And so I can relate to the children that are nervous, that don't understand, that want to
Mm,
hide. And so I'm really good. One of my strengths is talking to those children and
mhm,
calming them down and letting them know that we're all kind of scared here.
mhm,
Nobody really knows what's going to happen, but let's sit
mhm,
down and try our best. And then if the child doesn't want to be there, if it's painful or confusing, I don't
mhm.
want that child there. And I know that probably isn't the answer to your question,
Oh, it is.
but I'm not a professional in that regard. I don't want to make a child forcefully put a
Yeah.
child through something that they don't want. Obviously, I would try and encourage and let them know that we all feel nervous
Mhm,
and scared and apprehensive when we are put into new environments.
mhm.
Um, but I want the child to enjoy themselves and eventually get that comfort. And if they're not going to, well, then maybe we'll try it again in 6 months. Maybe
Right.
some growth for them might be what they need.
Well, I think that's
Or just maybe a different avenue. I have quarterly workshops at the Lake Travis Community Library where I do free community events for everybody in the area. And so maybe, encouraging the child to come to one of those free events with their family, getting to know me, kind of getting to know the vibe and what I represent, maybe then they'd be more comfortable later on doing something a bit more private with me. But I
mm,
think it's all baby steps, right? I don't want the kid to jump in.
yeah.
That's not gonna be fun for anybody.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's an excellent answer. It just maybe it's not the right time, maybe it's
Yeah.
not the right fit at the moment, but that doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not going to be in the future. And I like that idea of
Mm.
baby steps. And nobody is going to really be receptive if they're so shut down they won't be able to
No.
learn. So how do you make it fun for the kids? Because I'm imagining like the moms thinking, oh, my child wouldn't like that, or they wouldn't think it was fun.
Mhm.
So what do you do? I mean, I know you because I've met you personally, and you
Mhm.
are very fun and engaging. You're dynamic, like that's your personality. But how do you like apply that to the curriculum?
That's part of everything I do. The kids aren't going to learn if they're not entertained, right? And they're not going to want to come back if they're not entertained. It's not going to sit. They're not going to like me. So, engaging with them, having them relax and know that I'm not some rigid woman, in there with a ruler trying to teach them etiquette,
Mhm.
but that there's real world applications for this. And, maybe we're not going to have the most fun right now, but later on, you'll leave here with a smile on your face.
Mm.
Just be receptive to the information, and then we'll get through it. Because a lot of it is kind of these rigid rules sometimes, or these,
Mhm.
these definitions that are a bit dry when I'm trying to teach about character strengths, like the definition of resilience and perseverance. You have to explain these, and the kids kind of in one ear, out the other.
Mhm.
So I explained that, after we get through all the grit of it,
Mhm.
that there'll be fun, that there'll be activities. And I always make jokes. I'm always light. I try not to take the class too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, one of the reasons I started doing this was that when I was younger, I was an assistant to an etiquette coach in high school. This is what I did for my high school job.
Cool.
So I was always in the finishing programs. I was always going around to different events and areas and watching her teach the children and watching her, do the trainings.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of having that lens of seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, taking the things that I knew that were necessary, making sure that I brought them in, but doing it in a way that it was more modern, more fresh, more entertaining, cracking jokes. I'm a big fan of Shrek. So a lot of my workshops have Shrek references, and
Oh,
who doesn't
fun.
like Shrek, right?
Yeah.
And so I try and bring in little clips and little funny things, just to keep the children entertained and make it an event and not just lessons. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It
Okay.
does. No, it totally does. Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
that sounds like a lot of fun. And then what's your take on kind of like boys versus girls? Because when you talk a lot about this stuff,
Mhm.
what I think of is girls being able to kind of like want to be more interested in this and want to absorb, because we're like relational, and boys tend to have that stereotype of being like the more physical. And so this information might not be as relevant. But you have a daughter and a son, so I'm sure you've like
Yeah.
you've learned a workaround for that. So how have you done that?
I a lot of my workshops are more boy heavy, which
Mhm.
is shocking to most people because they think, oh, well, this is for girls. The modern manners, that's that's a girl thing.
Mhm.
My son's not interested. But I find the boys are actually very receptive. I think that some of the girls kind of think they know this already, or that their parents have kind of drilled these courtesies and these manners into them already. So it's just
Mhm.
another person telling them, to sit nicely, sit up straight, keep your elbows off the table. Where the
Mhm.
boys, this is kind of new to them. We have this bias on how we treat our children
Yes.
subconsciously. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
even though we want to say that we treat our children equally, we feminize our girls and we mask, like, it's just subconscious, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the kids come in, the girls are already like up to here with the manners and the sitting properly. So the boys, I think, are get more out of it. I think they appreciate it more sometimes. But then again, I hate to paint them with a broad brush because each person is so individual and each child has such
Yes.
a different response to the program. But I think people are shocked when they realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot more boys in here than I had anticipated.
Mhm.
And and I don't treat them differently. Everybody gets, um, but it's a bit of a it's just something that people aren't as don't expect as much, the boys in the class and how
Yeah.
receptive they are to it.
Yeah. I have my own personal, I don't know what I call it because I can't necessarily take credit for it, although maybe I can since I'm their mom. But my son, who's 14, well, I have two sons and two daughters, but my son who's 14, I think he's so polite. And he always says, "Hi,
Yeah.
mom, how's your day?" And I'm like, what other 14-year-old
Mhm.
boy says that? Right? Because we typically think of them as being so self absorbed. They're so into their own
Yeah.
things. And when I hear that, every time I don't know why I'm so shocked, but I just think it's the cutest thing. Or my other
Mhm.
son, who's 12, I love it when he texts me and he says something like, "Thank you." Like I've done something for him. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Thank you." And I'm like, I don't know why I'm so shocked. They're my own kids. I should know that like that's part of it. But it makes me feel good, as a mom
Mhm.
to feel like I'm doing a good job. And the thing is, so I don't think they were always that way. I think somehow maybe just like part of their development and part of what I've been teaching them. And so
Mhm.
what do you feel like? Do you, because you work with such a wide range, can you tell us kind of like what you see in like the 6-year-olds versus the 16-year-olds? Like, what are some of the kind of unique things about each age group?
16-year-olds are definitely harder to to talk to to teach than the younger kids. The younger kids are still very malleable and excited to be in a new environment, and they see
Yeah.
all the colors and the activities and they're curious, right? The
Yeah.
16-year-olds are kind of checked out and
Yeah.
they're on their phones and
Mm.
I'm not cool. My Shrek references just are kind of
They're not
missing the mark.
landing.
No, they don't like donkey.
Yeah.
Um but again, again, it's the broad brush. I hate to say it all, it's the 16-year-olds, but they come here with their on their iPhones and everything, so constantly asking them to please put their technology away.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you would think though that the older they got, the easier they would be, but I find
Mhm.
that the younger kids are the most curious and excited and the most willing to absorb what's being taught to them.
Yeah, they're the most open. So it's almost better,
Yeah.
not that you don't like to do it, but it's almost better. It's like if you're
Mhm,
going to do it, start them young when they're open and
mhm.
receptive, and then that just kind of, because our brains, they're neuroplastic and they're changing and they're firing and rewiring and all this stuff, and that's what happens developmentally is, we shed a lot of the unimportant information at about the age of 11 is when the brains start to
Mhm.
shed those initial connections that were made when they were babies and toddlers, but that information is no longer relevant. So it's like this information is relevant. And so how can you help the moms continue to reinforce it? Because if they learn it when they're 6, they're going to kind of need the
Mhm.
constant reminder. So what do you do for the parents to help them?
The constant reminders, sitting down at dinner and talking about these things,
Mhm.
modeling them, making sure that they're around, family members or neighbors that are also modeling this behavior and
Mhm.
have it be intentional, right? A lot of families think, oh, well, my children are in sports, so they'll pick up the resilience and the grit because they're great, in sports. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Mhm.
again, it's a peripheral type of learning. I think the intentional learning is where you really need to be at with this kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Okay.
And just the constant talking about it, bringing it up at dinner time, make talking points, make a list of, have you seen anybody represents, this characteristic today, or how
Mm.
did you represent this characteristic today? When I drop my kids off at for school, I always tell them to be kind, to be helpful, and to be funny.
Ah,
And which I think are very important, right? Because very different, strengths, but very necessary for engagement and communication and building, friendships and relationships with people. One of the things that I focus on, like you said, how do I keep the children entertained is humor. I think humor is one of the very, commonly overlooked character strengths.
mm,
But it's very important for, making people feel comfortable around you, having people feel warm and wanting to be in your presence. And so, you know, encourage the strengths that your kids are naturally kind of drawn to or exhibiting, and just the intention, bringing it up again over and over and over again. I mean,
mhm.
not in a drill sergeant type of way, but just in as casually as you can.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was just gold, pure gold, what you just said. Kind, helpful, and fun. Is that where
Yeah,
there's
funny,
oh, funny.
funny, yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because you did say humor. So, okay, that just
Yeah.
making sure. So kind, helpful, and funny. And so that's coming from
Hmm.
you, and that's what you're teaching your kids. And so I think
Hmm.
that's something that I'm going to start sharing with my kids. I think that's really valuable because it's like what
Thank
I
you.
those things make a great friend and they make a great
Hmm.
classmate, make a good kind of just like good citizen. And so what about, bringing up or bringing out the character strengths in maybe someone that's not it's not as easy or it's not as obvious. Maybe they are the more closed off child and they're not really showing you what, or maybe they're showing like some negative things and you're having a hard time finding those positives. How do you help them do that?
I think just, going through different activities,
Mm,
sports, Girl Scouts, putting them in an environment to where they're maybe able to pick it up from other people.
okay.
And I think also sometimes, I mean, I know you said the negative, which is not good, but sometimes being closed off and reserved and quiet, I don't think see that as a weakness sometimes. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
yes, you might,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I
Because
meant
I
like
certainly was.
yeah, yeah, like if they're in your class and you're having a hard time
Yeah.
getting a read on them, I was
Mhm.
heck, I love introverts. They're great.
Yeah. I don't
They
want
make
to put
the
the
best
spotlight.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't want to put the spotlight on anybody who doesn't want the spotlight on them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I think that comes with respecting their boundaries. Some people
yeah,
just aren't going to enjoy that.
yeah,
But going back to the negative, if they're exhibiting negative things,
right.
making sure they're in an environment to where they're around people that are exhibiting positive traits, right? And
Mm.
then hopefully slowly they'll, develop and a little bit of the other people will rub off on them.
Yeah.
And then, and if they're not, try something new,
Mhm.
sometimes, especially with sports and dance, it can be very competitive. So you put them into these things thinking that they're going to learn all these fabulous behavior traits. And
Mhm.
then actually backfires because it's too competitive. It makes them feel self-conscious, or it drops their confidence. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So making sure they're actually in the right activity for them as well, right? I
Oh.
think is important.
That's really wise. Another, I feel like that's a golden tip for today
Oh.
is really being aware of the environments that they are putting their kids in.
Hmm.
I can't remember who taught me this. It was one of my guests a long time ago, and so now my mind it'll take me a second. But they talked about talking to the coach of the team, or
Mm,
maybe if it's the dance leader, whoever whoever the adult is that is in charge of the activity,
hmm.
and really to get to know them and to form a
Yeah.
relationship with them, and how
Yeah.
important that was. And I was like, wow, I never did that when my kids were younger. I didn't
Yeah.
think of that. I just assumed that it was fine, but I didn't think of like really developing that relationship. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts
I
about
mean,
that?
they're the leader, right? It's like when you're in a corporate environment, the leader sets the stage and the energy tone for the
Mhm,
entire company. Same thing with
mhm,
sports teams or dance teams. The leader, the coach, is going to be the one who models initially, right? And if they come in very competitive, very, like you said, authoritative, then it's not going to suit a lot of the children very well.
mhm, mhm.
So yeah, they definitely set the tone. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. And how
Okay.
would you like to spend that? Because, again, our audience is worldwide, so maybe not everybody can get
Mhm.
to your classes, but like, what are just maybe a few more things that tidbits that you could give the moms today?
Again, focusing that intention on the character strengths and the traits that you want to see in your children.
Hmm.
We are overwhelmed as parents. There's so much information being thrown at us on how to do parenting properly, right? We put our children into sports. We spend Saturday mornings and Sunday nights in the freezing cold or the heat to try and encourage, athletic strengths in our
Hmm.
children. We spend hours helping them with math and reading novels to them and teaching them all this stuff to develop academic strengths. I know my house is covered with glitter and paint in the hopes that my children will develop artistic strengths. And so we do all these things already as parents to develop these strengths, but the strength that really is the most important that leads, to have overall success and happiness and well-being and harmony in life are the character strengths. Yet they're
Mm,
commonly overlooked or assume that they'll be picked up, by doing other things.
mhm,
So again, focusing intentionally on these strengths, because these strengths are going to be the things that really decide the pathway and the behaviors and the impact that you'll have in life.
mhm,
And another thing about character strengths that I think is so important is that it's fluid, right? You're not born with a certain strength and then that's it. So with IQ, which I know is a popular thing right now to discuss, is how IQ, you're just born with it, right?
mm,
Yet we're constantly doing puzzles and doing all these things to try and improve our intelligence and make ourselves
mhm,
more smart, which is great. But you can't really change it, but you can change, your honesty, your integrity, the core values that make you a person, that make you
mm,
that make you engage with the world. Those are something that we can develop and enhance.
mm,
So I think it's important to focus on that, because if you're going to spend time on something, make it something that you have control over, not something you don't have control over.
mhm.
And so, yeah, I think character strengths are overlooked as a part of a necessity in raising children.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, this is not things that we were taught as children.
Mm-mm.
We didn't
No.
have this social emotional learning component when we grew up, so it
Mm-mm.
doesn't necessarily maybe come natural that we are outwardly teaching it. So I love that you've kind of like found this niche and you realize how important this is, and you're sharing your message and really getting that out there and really explaining like why this is important, coming on to talking to an audience like today and really bringing this to the mom's awareness, because I know, as we all are, we are kind of on autopilot. We're just moving throughout our
Yep.
day, and like you're saying, we focus on all these things, But maybe like one of the most important things that we could possibly imagine, we are actually overlooking because there
Yeah.
hasn't been a structure for us in the
Mhm.
past. And so I, I,
Mhm.
I I think that what the work that you're doing is just incredibly important in creating good citizens of the world, creating good people, and helping moms help to do that for their kids. So going forward, how can people find you if they want to reach out, if they want to learn more about your programs?
Absolutely. So I have a website, reachforthestarsatx.com. And then I'm also on social media, reach for the stars ATX. They can private message me. On my website, I have all of my upcoming events. I
Okay.
have a few community events coming up at the Lake Travis Library. Um, I'm doing quite a few things, but I have everything that's available there. And then if there's anything that you don't see that you are interested in your children learning, let me know. I'm always looking for new ideas, new content. Maybe I had a parent actually reach out to me last year. Their children are going to a wedding. So I customized a wedding, how the
Oh,
I do's and I don'ts of being a wedding guest, how
smart.
to, handle your handles yourself in that environment.
Mhm.
And so I'm open to ideas. And I would love to meet new people and be there for your guests.
That is really
That
great.
is
And
really
I
great.
have a vision for you of kind of going national or going, global with like having some more courses that maybe are, digitally accessible for
Mhm.
other people. So that's my, magic
Send
ta-da
it to
for
me.
you.
I'll take it.
Yes. Yes. Ding, ding. So anyway, yes, be kind, be helpful, be funny. This is amazing. And Barbara, thank you so
Mhm.
much for coming on today. I
Thank
mean,
you, Laura.
just incredibly helpful and knowledge and just great information for all of our guests. Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.